Good morning, everybody. I am Bryce. I'm a random person from Friends Church, and today we're starting a 2-week series called Pastor on the Hot Seat. And I've actually never seen Vince nervous about anything. And this one, he had like a lot of questions about the questions I was getting. Good for Vince. Vince, I think one of the things he would say to most people is that like vulnerability is not his strong suit. I'm going to push him a little this morning. Let me tell you how this is going to work, and then we'll get him right up here. So we had questions from the community. They were anonymous. There were so many. We didn't know how many that we were going to get, and it wound up being something like the running tally is like 60 questions that you folks put thought into. We're not going to be able to get into them all. I've sometimes condensed multiple thoughts into, one question, and, we did our absolute best. Next week is Jeff, so he's going to have almost a totally different set of questions. I'm going to have 2 buttons here. One is a boo that sounds like a moo. That's for Vince if I don't feel like he's being vulnerable enough. That's the Vince needs to be vulnerable question, and then the other one goes tick-tack, and that means stop. Wrap her up there, bud. We got stuff to do. So with that, I would like to request, for those who can, a standing ovation for the man who puts the men in Mennonite, Vince Clausen.
Wow. It's always good when a standing ovation is asked for, huh?
Yeah.
Super popular.
Part of the magic,
Just 1 second.
maybe.
I'm not good at vulnerability? Come on.
Yeah,
Sorry?
look at you.
I'm chill, relaxed, open.
And that's coming from Gregory. Okay, so let's get started, folks. We're going to kind of get through all these. We got 33 minutes or so. Okay, Vince, we had so many good questions. Here's the one I'm going to start with.
Sure.
What is the one question or topic you're most afraid Bryce will bring up?
You know what, honestly, I thought through a lot of this stuff because that's what my brain does. And there was nothing that I thought you would ask me about that I was like, no, I'm scared of that one. It's kind of what you're going to ask me about my life and the stuff that I think about every day, all day. It's kind of like, this is my life, so it's pretty easy to talk about.
Very fair. I am going to...
I'm not sure why I got booed for that one.
The answer, if you remember Sunday school, was Jesus.
Oh.
So,
well played.
Okay, so we actually had a lot of questions. The questions broke down to sort of almost like a 1/3 split, but
Okay.
with a little sliver of like really fun questions. And it was sort of like about, our pastors, their story, and not in the way that you thought people were going to dig for gossip. Or maybe Jeff said that. I think Jeff said that. But in a really curious way that I think is going to add value. There were questions about spirituality, and then some that were like a little theological.
Sure.
And so we're going to talk about all those.
Yeah.
Okay, so first of all, how and when did you decide to become a pastor?
It's a long story. I'm just condensing it in my head. I went to Bible school. No, right after high school, because when you grow up in a church like mine, like your gap year is you go to Bible school. That's what you do.
It's not a gap, but continue.
I had a gay pastor who was not out in any way, shape, or form, and was not able to be out. And everyone knew he was gay, but no one could admit it. Say to me, he sat me down, and he's like, I think you would be a pastor. And I laughed in his face, and I was like, yeah, whatever. I'm going to go be an engineer. And so I finished my year, went to engineering. The whole time in the back of my head, it was like this voice was like, you need to go be a pastor. And I'm like, do you know me? Like, look at me. Math, I love math. I'm not super great with people. This is maybe not the career path for me. So it got so loud in my head that I quit school, and I just started working. And it was still there, and finally I was like, pardon my French, but F it. Me and my girlfriend broke up, she moved out, and I was like, okay, whatever. I'm going to go back to school. So I went to school. The whole time I'm thinking, well, they're going to kick me out. So I went through my master's degree, still going, okay, screw this. I won't be a pastor. I'll just go be a teacher. I'll be a professor. Mm-hmm. And at the end, I had this feeling I needed to go to Friends Church. I was attending here, and I was like, I need to do my internship. I tried everything I could. Internship is basically I volunteer 3 months of my life for free to a church. And I was like, yeah, that's not going to happen.
Yeah, get that money, boy.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and I didn't want to be a pastor, so I don't care about going to church.
Yeah.
3 months turned into 23 years.
Amazing.
The first 10 years, actually, Jeff, do you remember this? I didn't call myself a pastor. It took me like forever. I was like, no, I'm a programming director. I do other things. And then finally I was like, okay, if it quacks like a duck, you might as well call it a duck.
Yeah.
So it was a bit kicking and screaming.
Okay, good. No, that's not your job. Hit the showers. Okay, quick follow-up.
Sure.
In a sort of a sentence or two, what do you think that version of Vince that was going to, in those very early days of like your pastor training, TM, that version for you, what would that version of Vince think about you now?
Fairly happy. The reason I didn't think I could be a pastor is because the theology of my tradition, the way they thought about religion, didn't work for me. The way they thought about the Bible didn't work for me. And I thought theirs was the only way I could do it. Therefore, I couldn't be a pastor. And so when I finally realized, no, we can get rid of a lot of that crap and change it, and then we put it into Friends Church, it was like, well, shit, like, I absolutely want, like, this is the perfect place for me. This is exactly where I want to be. Like, seriously, like, I get to come in every day and inspire people.
Okay. 2 sentences, my dude, but good on you.
Fair point.
But thank you. That was cool. I didn't know that about you. Which B-list historical character from the Bible would you most like to have dinner with and get to ask anything about the world at their
Augustine.
time?
Be like, dude, what's up with your sexuality? Seriously. It is so repressed, and you wrote so much about it, and it became so much part of the church. Like, where did that come from? I just want to be like, what happened in your background?
Did you listen to the question?
Yeah.
I said in the Bible.
Oh, in
Not
the Bible.
about the Bible.
He basically wrote every commentary on the Bible.
I didn't ask that question.
Then B-list, we'll go with John. I studied John. I did most of my master's degree in John.
What would you want to ask John about?
Did he actually think of God through a Trinitarian lens?
Or was that ascribed to him? Tell me a little bit more about that.
Trinitarian doesn't start, that idea of the Trinity didn't start for about 100 years. It was first mentioned about 125. And yet, the entire tradition that I grew up with was Trinity is the thing. And they used John to do it. So when I studied the first 2 verses of John. In the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God. That's the basis of the Trinity. And I was like, when I studied it doesn't need to mean that. But I can't tell what he actually meant by it. So I'd love to sit down with him and be like, hey, dude, what were you thinking there?
That's a great answer. Okay, so
Got you speechless?
you're just so eloquent, and I cherish you. Okay, so we're gonna move into the more serious question. We might come back to some of the fun ones if we have time. Okay, so how would you describe your own personal belief system to a stranger that asks about your theology? This is the one question where I'll allow you to be as vague or detailed or skip if you feel like that's appropriate.
No. So when I'm out with people, depends. I have 2 times. Sometimes they don't want to talk about this, so I just say I'm a welder. Because I do weld, and I'm pretty good at it.
Hell yeah, brother.
When I say I'm a pastor, they usually go, what does that mean? And I usually talk about Friend Church and taking water, and they go, yeah. And then they start asking me questions from their Sunday school. And usually I say this, I'm a functional theist, which means that I don't necessarily, if you want me to prove the existence of a super being, a divine being, I have no interest in that. If you hold that, I have no problems with that. But that's not where my spirituality lies. I like living my life through the lens of a higher purpose that says I will live in a spiritual way that will be a healthy me, that will take water to the world. To me, that's a functional theism, meaning it's not, I'm not proving the existence of God, I'm not interested in that. But there's something of the divine story that I hold on to because I like it. It colors my life, it shapes the way I behave, it gives me a better purpose and a better meaning for my life. And so when they go, but you can't prove, and I go, yeah, not interested in that. And then they go, you know what, actually that makes some sense to me why you've said it that way. Living as a good human, living in a beautiful way with the people around you, being healthy, that's worth thinking about. So that's usually how I answer that question.
Yeah, there's the first time I heard Rob Bell say about the question he always gets about like, well, is God real? And he just said, that question bores me. That was actually a very liberating moment for me. I was like, that question does bore me too, like I don't care.
It's not interesting to me.
No.
We could spend 20 years, 2,000 years of writing since the New Testament. People have been writing, does the super being conception of God exist? And no one's got it figured out. So can we just let that go and say, okay, but there's a divine story that I want to hold on to, not because it's provable, but because it's profound for me. Unique spiritual journey. That's why we say this. For me, that colors. When I'm looking at my wife and I'm mad, I'm like, wait a second here, hold on. Or when I'm in the world, I go, okay, wait, is this all about Vince, or do I need to think about the we here? Like, that's way more impactful to me than, is there a super being conception, and does he, or he, she, they know everything? Like who cares? Mm-hmm. So boring, a little judgmental. I like to go with not interesting to me.
Yeah, no, okay, that's a good point. I'll switch that language. Theologically speaking, if you folks are wondering, that's called Schrodinger's Christ.
Oh.
Nailed it.
Jargon.
Okay, so I'm going to read this question, I think, exactly as it was written, because I think that the parentheses that the writer added are important. So okay. I'm curious, do you ever find it easier to feel your conception of God in certain places or with certain people? And when you can't be in those spaces or with those people, what practices or advice do you have connecting with your conception of God in the moment? You have a really good Sistine Chapel story about this, I think.
Let me back up and say, there's a question in the question seems to assume I have a single conception of God. I have many, and I use different ones at different times. When I got the call that says, your mom's got cancer and is terminal, I switched to a conception of God that could heal her, because that's what I needed in that moment. Oftentimes, I live in a conception of God that is love. When I love, that's the divine. In the love itself is the divine. So I'm pretty open about it. I switch around all the time. So the question is saying, you have a conception. What do you do when I have many conceptions? The hardest one, though, I think what they're trying to get to is, what happens if I'm in a group where people have a very different conception of God? That one I'm still struggling with. If you look at stages of faith, this idea of like stage 2 is we all think the same thing and we all agree on the same thing. That's the meadow. It's beautiful if you fit. Stage 3 is you start to ask questions and say, wait, this doesn't work. Stage 4 is the ability to connect with all traditions and find value in them. My growing up tradition, I still can't get to stage 4 on. And so when I'm in a moment where someone from my tradition starts saying absolute statements, my blood starts to boil and I have to keep my mouth shut because I'm like, I'm about to say really, I won't say hurtful things, but I will definitely go on the attack and be like, really? Let's pull out the Bible and have this conversation, shall we? And then it usually ends up with people not liking me very much. So I struggle. The honest answer, if I can frame the question that way, when I'm in my tradition that I grew up with, that's when I'm at my worst. And I find it the most difficult to find connection to the conception of God they have in a way that's beautiful and loving. Too much of my crap gets in the way, and my wounding and my anger and my stuff I haven't dealt with. And I just don't behave great.
Yeah, that's very fair. I don't know if this resonates for anybody else here, but I had to let go of my delight, my sick delight in correcting people. And because what brought me back to the church in some sense after like 8 years out was seeing that as some people would say, like the understanding that like rabbis argued about this stuff. Mm-hmm. And that at some point, some dude was like, nah, dog, this is all just literal. There's one way. And it made me giddy to be like, let me tell you. And I had to let go of that.
Me and Jeff actually have a phrase.
Jeff and I.
No, me and Jeff. That's for you, dude. Right? We talked about this meadow, stage 2, beautiful. If you fit in the meadow, it's awesome. For some reason, we don't. We're down on a ledge, different kind of spirituality. We called it sniping the meadow. We sit down there and take pot shots at them. And at some point we said, okay, we got to stop sniping the meadow. Like, it's not helping them. It's not helping us. It's coming from a place of pain. There's no love here. We just got to let that go. And for the most part, we're good at it. Now and again. At a family gathering.
Family gathering, yeah. This is an interesting follow-up question. We'll keep this one brief, but
Sure.
What, if anything, do you miss from your more traditional sort of stage 2 Mennonite upbringing and, how did I write this? And life before you became this handsome, burly, dirt bike driving leader of the unwashed masses?
That was written there, huh?
Yeah, I translated it from Greek, so.
That's super being conception of God. So just remember, there's different ways to conceive of God when I use that word. If you grew up in a traditional church, God is a being above you that's stronger than you, that if you say the right things and do the right things, you can get them to do something for you. Sometimes I miss feeling like maybe there's a hope that I could get this fixed. When somebody gets sick and I'm like, oh, that should not happen. I wish I still had the thing where I could pray and believe that it's going to fix that. And sometimes I can still do it in a new way, and sometimes I'm just like, that would be nice to have right now. That would be really nice.
Very fair. Okay, I'm going to do something that is going to make 12% of our audience very happy, but this is my special treat for Vince, the theologian. So if this isn't your thing, just hold on. We'll spend 5 minutes here and move on. Okay, so in the first creation myth, it says, God says, let us create. This is not a translation issue, as far as we know. So which midrash interpretation is your favorite of these three? That God is talking to angels in this story and saying, let us with the angels. Don't give it away. Listen. Ever seen someone on Millionaire just say A as soon as it comes up? They're not allowed. Is it the royal we, because creating of humanity is more significant? Or the interpretation, I'm going to bias this, that I like is that this is sort of the divine talking about the earth. The earth is part of the creation process, the dust. Okay, yeah, my idea is bad. Go. What's your take here?
So there's one more. There's an idea called the crimson thread, meaning the Trinity exists here, and this is the proof of it. If you look back at other creation traditions, so the Gilgamesh epic, things like that, the Enuma Elish, you see divine characters talked about in the plural. It's like the royal we. And so we see that fairly consistently in that era of writing. And the creation myths, all three, possibly four of them, they all use very similar language to those myths that were part of that tradition. And they use we to talk. So again, the big God is we, the little God is I. And it's just a way of saying like, so the we of majesty is my favorite. The idea of it talking about the earth is an interesting thing, but remember, especially in the first one, the story isn't about creation. The story is about a wrestling with chaos. All is chaos. The being floats over chaos in the beginning. And then it creates order in chaos. Chaos meaning is the idea of like bad and evil. Chaos, right? When I get cancer, that's chaos. That's bad. Easy. And it's creating order for that. So the idea of the divine character talking to the earth, that it's seeing as chaos, that it's creating into order, it seems like a bit of a stretch. I'm not saying it couldn't be that, but the we of majesty makes way more sense across literature in that time period and that style of writing.
That was really hurtful that you said that to me. But
just 1 second, you're wrong.
Vince, the theologian, folks, we love that. Right, isn't that so interesting? That I love that stuff. I love when you do it. The time I decided I wanted to join Friends Church was, there was an Easter series where I think you went through like 3 different conceptions of like what Easter means, like historically, theologically, and I was like, oh yeah, get me in there, baby. I'm gonna go show up hungover and play guitar, and just nail it. Okay, so I want to jump into this next one, and I'm going to read this with what I think is the intent of the person who wrote it.
Sure.
I'm trying to capture their tone here.
Oh, okay.
how do you refute a person who believes the Bible is literal, flawless, inerrant, etc., only able to be translated or read in one correct way? We touched on this a bit. What are your thoughts? I'm leaning back. I'm ready.
Am I in a good place or am I in a really bad place? Because if I'm in a bad place, I'm going to point out, well, I usually start with, does God change his mind? And they say, no. And then I say, okay, what about the verse where it says, and God changed his mind? And then they go, and then it's on, and then we just go from there. And then I just keep taking things apart one after the other. But when I'm in a better place, I'm trying to think of when that happens. No, usually my better response is this. Tell me why that matters to you. And usually what happens is somebody will say, I remember, I won't say the name, but I was talking with someone not in our community. They said to me, if I can't know for certain what God is, who God is, how they react, what they say, what do I even have? And so for me to take off the question on the top is such a deep problem for them. And so now more I'm interested in going, tell me why you need it to be that way. What's the core thing that you need? And then if I honor people's unique spiritual journey, which we value and sometimes I can do, then I can engage at that level and saying, yeah, I know, it feels like the world is pretty chaotic right now. And having the answer, it feels like something. It feels pretty good for people, especially when everything else is kind of in chaos. So yeah, my answer is sometimes poorly, and when I'm in a really good place, I can usually answer it that way.
This is a very good strategy that I'm going to take on instead of my rants about Paul. Do I hate Paul, guys.
Did we get the heart of that question?
We did, I think. I think you nailed that, because I think that person, I got this sense, whether it was intentional or not, it sounded like it was kind of from a place of frustration, but I think that you relating to that, because I get that way too, and I, more than what I said before, one of the things that got me back into the Bible and studying it in the way that I think that the original authors maybe wrote it, place, time, culture, history. It gets far more interesting, like I don't have to tell you that, but was just seeing all these people use like the words of Jesus to create a rationale for hate. Mm-hmm. And I was like, if I can disarm these people, maybe that helps. You can't, fun fact, but that's...
But you know what? If you take, so when you read the Bible, you're asking it a series of questions. If you ask the question time, place, that's historical critical criticism. It's basically saying, what does the original author mean? Usually that's not tied to the original author, it's tied to what does my tradition tell me the original author means. One of the things that's shifted me the most in the last couple of years is asking a different set of questions. Ask the question, what does it mean to be human in this story? What is the insight into my own humanity? So instead of trying to point up to God and say, well, this is what God is and this is what's going on. No. Why is the person asking that question? Where is that question in me? What are they feeling right now? And so when I ask somebody, like when they say, the Bible's true and you have to read the King Jimmy and all that stuff, if I can ask the same question, I say, what is it in you, your humanity, that you're trying to find in that? That's the beauty of it. So historical, grammatical, boo.
No, that was good. No, stop. I'm in charge. This man cannot let go of control, folks.
I was just telling someone I have a control manager. For all those people who heard that message, yeah, control manager.
The other set of questions that we got, first of all, that was a great answer. That was amazing, and I'm sure a lot of us got some value out of that. So I want to shift gears, because we had a lot of questions sort of about friends, church life, that I thought were really fascinating.
Okay.
And I do think that one of the things we do well to make people feel included is to not bombard them when they walk in and be like, have you joined a small group? Have you connected with other mothers? You can.
Yeah.
But I think that you can. But so that question came up because I think that is a double-edged sword. We're not going to bombard you.
Yeah.
But people had a couple questions about how to get involved in stuff.
Okay, but it's deeper than we won't bombard you. In a traditional church that I grew up with, the world is bad. That's where chaos lives. It's safe inside the church. So I go to church Sunday morning, I go to church Sunday evening, I go to church for youth group on Fridays, I go to Bible study on Wednesdays. All my friends are in the church. Like, that's the safe space. If you think about spirituality the way that we talk about it, meaning healthy us, healthy them, into we, and then taking water into a place, you can't live in community, or in, let's say, cloistered that way. You can't hide inside. You need to be in the world. So you can see the things that need help, that your spirituality goes, oh, no, here's my friend who's not part of the church, but they're struggling, and I need to do something because that's part of my spirituality. You can't have people stuck in the church all the time because they have no time for anything else. They have no connection outside the church. So our intentionality is to say, no, this is a gym, and we all have full lives. Full connections. We're connected with people outside the church and inside the church so that we can express our spirituality throughout it all. It doesn't just hide inside the castle walls and we all get the water from the well. No. We got to actually go outside. So let's take down the walls. Now, I think your comment and their comment is accurate. That has a cost to it. If you hold everyone inside and you make everyone friends, there's a certain feeling to that. And I grew up with that. It's pretty beautiful. Some of my closest growing up friends were all from the church. So we always have this tension of feeling connected here and being connected in our world so that we can live this thing out throughout everything. And so, do we always handle it perfectly? I like to think of it more in tension, and each person has to manage that. If you find yourself wanting to hide inside, maybe there's a spiritual question of saying why. If you find yourself not wanting to connect at all because you're like, I'm not religious, like kind of you during that time where you're like, no, I'm not part of this, that's also worth asking a question about. So it's not that we don't bombard, it's that we deliberately create space for people to have broad connections in their lives so that again, we find we there, and we can take water through all of that, not with any agenda other than to make the world better. Okay, now your question, sorry.
You didn't even try.
Yeah, but I had to set the context.
No, it was
Come
good.
on.
Oh, yeah, you sure had to.
So now ask me, how do they feel connected?
No, that was great. I didn't know that about the logic of that, and that's really powerful. I always thought that was more just like not, making people feel like they were trying to be indoctrinated in a cult immediately, which it has that benefit. That's not a joke. Like that has that benefit. A lot of us have that, yeah, right? But no, that was good insight. So how can someone get more involved if they want to? Is that just talk to you, send an email?
No. There's great. So I'll give you the generic ways. We have groups. So if you go onto our app or onto the website, how to get connected, how to get involved, groups. People who want to do things as a way to connect to people who are of like mind through their spirituality. Or maybe even some people might say values or morality, somewhere in there. So that's a great space to do it. If you have time, if you're looking for that. Volunteerism. I know a ton of people who use volunteerism as a way to connect. And you see, as soon as teams walk in, they're all like, "Oh, hey, buddy." Craig will say all the time, like, this is my second family. Like, I love these people. So volunteering is a great way to get involved. That one you need to email Jeff and I because it's pretty unique how it works. Yeah, those are kind of the ways. Being a part of this. Can you feel the difference between being here and being on the camera? No disrespect to anyone on the camera right now. My wife is homesick today. It's beautiful that she can watch. But it feels different being here than just sitting at home, right? And so one of the ways to be involved, feel connected, get connected, is to actually physically come and do this.
Great, thank you. I have two more questions, so we'll keep these ones tight, and then we're going to wrap it up. So,
nice.
I'm excited to ask you this question. So we have a lot of podcast listeners.
Yep.
What is some of the most interesting data and insight about our podcast listeners that you have seen? Because I know you watch data as much as I do.
Yes.
Yeah.
Another data. So for a while, we had a lot of Germans who really were into us. Not sure why. Number one message downloaded is our reinterpreting the Clobber passages on homosexuality. Probably 2 or 3 times anything else. That one's... I should maybe apologize because a couple years ago, I came out to our career community and I said, look, the homosexuality issues done in the church. Like, you guys are as welcome as everyone else. Like, you're no different other than I need to know the gender of your partner. And they looked at me like I was a dumbass. And I was like, no, but it's over, right? And they were like, no, it's not. And I'm like, no, but like, seriously, I don't have to deal with this anymore. They're like, no, you need to talk about this. So I was like, okay. So I went in and built another message. Jeff and I did work on it. And they were right. The number of people who are trying to wrestle with a connection to the Bible and a love of the queer community, either themselves, the people they love, the people in their community, that is still not dealt with. In my head, because I've studied it so much, I'm like, it's not an issue anymore. And they were right. I was wrong.
Do you remember the first email I sent to Friends Church? It said,
No, I can't pick it up.
It said, hey, it seems like you guys are doing something cool, but I haven't seen a statement about inclusivity for like queer and trans people. And Vince went, well, it's just obvious to us. I went, yeah, maybe toss that on the website, my dude.
Okay, so you were also right. And I started off by writing, we called them...
I don't care, I want to move on.
Okay. But it's a good story.
I know, you have so many good ones. So the last thing I want, because I actually think this question is really important. Does that say 28?
27.
27, perfect.
Glasses.
So the last, I have LASIK, it's just glaring. So the last question we're going to do today is, and I liked how this was phrased, why doesn't Friends Church do prayers during the service? I heard a kind of prayer in December, a kind of prayer, one, but I'm curious about the history behind that.
That's a great question.
We had
and it's
so
a
many
valid
good
question.
questions.
We actually have a series coming up. So after this series, we're doing one on prayer, Talking to the Sky. It is, in a traditional church where there's a super being conception of God, prayer is straightforward. I talk to the super being to try and get something done. I read the Bible to figure out how do I talk to the super being to get things done. It's straightforward. We have all these kind of ways of doing it. As soon as the super being conception of God shifts to, say, a hyper being where there's like, you can't get that one to do what you need it to do by saying the right things, prayer starts to get really, really tricky. And so what you'll see from me is I'm praying, but I'm not using the traditional formula of saying, hey, God, super being in the sky, conception of God, can you do this? Or the preach prayer, which is where the pastor preaches their message in a prayer form at the end that summarizes it all. I'm not sure where that came from, but it's kind of a measure of your pastoralness of how eloquently you can preach your prayer. That's not cool either. Do any of you preach your prayers, when you pray? Since you are the creator of the universe, therefore I, blah, blah, blah. No. So we don't want to talk in ways that aren't consistent with all of us. So first we have a conception of God problem. That's really tricky. Then we have a problem where the tradition has not used this well for a long time. So then what does prayer look like? And so I've been working on a series of this for probably a year now to explore, if I take away the super being conception of God, can I still have prayer and what does it look like? And it's really, really, really cool what you can do. But it takes your mind opening. You can't just be like, the thing I say to the super being to get the thing that I want. Suddenly things start to shift and you go, oh wait, what if my life can be lived as prayer? Suddenly you go, oh, that's got some juice to it. And I don't have to have a theology that I don't work with anymore.
That was wicked, thank you. So to end, I'm going to pray because you heathens have not been. And I just wanted
So
to...
just 1 second, who thinks that his prayer is going to get answered?
Great news, I'm not looking for it to get answered. But I thought that seeing how other people in the community pray might be fascinating to people. So this is how I pray. It's very fascinating, and this is a sincere moment. So generally, God, Spirit, super being, universe, please help me see the stuff that I need to see in myself and in the world around me so that I can help with a reordering of the world so that the world can be a better place. Amen. And that is all that I can bring myself to do, but it is completely sincere that I just want to see my opportunities and stop being blind and selfish. And I think that that is a great way to do it. And I am in charge of this church now because I prayed more than you. with that, I have a final question.
Oh,
this is
I'm not done?
a very big thing.
For me or for them?
This was, for, I think, the world.
Okay, the world.
It's time to settle something very important.
I'm answering for the world. Got it.
Could God microwave a burrito so hot he himself could not eat it? And with that, Vince, thank you for being up here. Everybody, you're free to go.
Look at
Enjoy
him.
your week.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming out.